Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. I'm Chloe Rigby, editor of internetretailing.net, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, E-commerce Maths, How to Succeed Where 80% of Your Competitors Failed. Over the next hour, we're going to be hearing from Sam Kellett, Head of Content at Expedia, Nicola Fox, Head of CRM at Missguided, and Andy Culligan, VP of Marketing at Expedia. Together, they'll be taking a focus on retail maths and strategies that work for decreasing customer acquisition cost and increasing customer lifetime value. Let me introduce you to our speakers today. Sam Kellett leads Expedia's content team within the marketing department. He focuses on planning the company's content cycles, supporting his team of writers to deliver relevant, value-driven articles on specialized marketing topics. And his work's recently been centered on the maths behind online retail's key metrics. Nicola Fox is Head of Customer Relationship Management at Missguided. She is a senior marketing and digital professional with far-reaching and extensive knowledge and skills acquired while working within the retail sector. Her main focus at Missguided has been to oversee the development of data-driven CRM from batch blast email. And Andy Culligan leads the marketing team of regional and digital marketing experts at Expedia. He focuses on new business opportunities and is actively involved in leading his team. He's particularly interested in the maths of marketing and runs, measures and optimizes online and offline campaigns, targeting key prospects to convert them into happy customers in the online retail space. At the end, so let me talk a little bit about what we're going to be covering today. We are going to be looking first of all at that breakdown of the online retail formula for success, comparing top companies to the average, then moving on to talk about strategies to reduce customer acquisition cost, and finally strategies to increase customer lifetime value. Let me tell you as well about how we are going to be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And you'll be able to ask your questions through the chat box. If you write a question in that box, press send. We'll aim to get to as many as we can on today's webinar. And finally, just to remind you that the webinar is, as always, recorded, and we'll be following up with a link to the webinar so you can watch it again whenever's most convenient for you. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker today, Andy Culligan from Expedia. Andy, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Chloe. Thank you for the intro as well. And also thank you for everybody joining today. Yeah, let me get started. So let's start on what's actually driving online retail success. And let's look at the different factors that are involved there. So we have four things on this slide around conversion rate, purchase frequency, order value, and gross margin. And the question that people ask time and time again is, okay, which are the most important ones here, right? Now, the answer to that question is all of them. So in order to get this right, it really works out as a formula or an equation. And it's quite simple. It's nothing new to anybody. But its customer acquisition cost should be less than your lifetime value of your customer base. So what does that actually mean? It means that the amount of money you're paying for somebody to come and actually purchase from you should be less than what you actually get from them over the long term, so over their lifetime, right? So how do we actually break that down? Okay, so there's an additional layer here which is not on the previous slide, which is around cost per visit. Cost per visit and conversion rate are where we look at on the left-hand side of the formula, which is customer acquisition costs. So what are the things that we can be doing to lower those customer acquisition costs within those two areas, right? If we're looking at lifetime value, we're looking at average order value multiplied by frequency of purchase multiplied by gross margin. And within each of those different layers of this formula, there are different things that we're able to do in order to improve each single one, and we're going to be concentrating on those today. So just in the meantime, though, we'll do a quick poll. Out of each of these different stages within the formula, which one is weakest for you guys?
So that poll should now be showing on your screen. And the question is, which KPI do you think is weakest for your company? 5 possible answers. And it's showing now. 5 possible answers: cost per visit, conversion rate, average order value, purchase frequency, or gross margin? And I'll just give you a moment longer to share your answers there. And now I'm going to close the poll and share the answers with everybody. And you'll be able to see that the people who answered, 28% said that cost per visit was the weakest in their company, 31% said conversion rate, 3% average order value, 34% purchase frequency, and 3% gross margin. Andy, Sam, is that what you were expecting?
So yeah, it's interesting. I'd wonder if so for example, the gross margin one is a tricky one, and this is one that we normally get quite a bit of feedback on. Is how do I impact the gross margin part? So we'll get to that a little bit later on. I'd be interested in knowing, maybe in the Q&A a bit later on, if people could take a note if the average order value and the gross margin they find hard to measure, and is that a reason why they might be low here?
Yeah, that's a curious one. I like seeing the purchase frequencies at 34% though, because I think we have some pretty good strategies for how to improve purchase frequency in this.
And also conversion rate as well. It's also something that's interesting. Absolutely. As well. So we have some good tips in here in terms of how to improve that conversion rate, and also the cost per visit, with some good examples from Nicola as well there as well. So okay, so let's move on then. Okay, so over the past 18 months or so, we've been doing a lot of research across over 1,000 online retail companies, which showed the best in class, and then the medium in class, and I'd say the worst in class. And we've done some comparisons across each and based on this online retail formula. If we look at the best in class, so Missguided being one of them, ASOS, Zalando, Boohoo, we've seen that the average conversion rate across these brands is 3.2%. Now, this is based off data from 18 months, so it's based over that 18-month period. Our average order value from those brands is €86, with an average purchase frequency of 2.78 and an average gross margin of 46.26. So they're the best in class. Now, if we look at the gap between those best in class and the sort of average, so the guys that aren't doing too badly, but they're actually mid-market, let's say, they're doing okay. Their average conversion rate is 0.8% with an average order value of €23, an average purchase frequency of 1.45, and an average gross margin of 32.5. So these are the guys that are still doing pretty well, but the gap between those guys at the top and the guys in the middle is growing ever so quickly. So if we look at this in terms of how that translates and why it's so alarming, if we look at those the average guys that I just mentioned there, their conversion rate or their cost per acquisition or customer acquisition cost is €15, whereas the average lifetime value amongst those brands is $10.67. So they're actually losing money. So they're not concentrating on the different things they can be doing in order to increase everything on the right. They're focusing all of their efforts onto that cost per acquisition. So this is something it shouldn't be new to anybody, but seeing these numbers was an alarming thing to us. Originally, everybody's always talking about, it's cheaper to retain your customers than to acquire them. That's obvious, but what does that actually mean in the real world? And this gives us a good overview of what that means.
All right, so now that we've introduced you to the online retail formula, I'm going to talk a little bit about some strategies for customer acquisition costs, starting with how to expose the challenges connected to your customer acquisition cost that your company may face. These first few slides, first I'm just going to go through customer acquisition cost as it is. Now, as we said, that breaks down to cost per visit and conversion rate. And cost per visit, you find that by taking your total marketing costs, dividing it by your total number of visits, not visitors, that's visits individually. And basically, it's just how much it costs for every visit to your page. Now, conversion rate, everybody knows that's the total number of conversions divided by the total number of visits. And that's to tell how much of your traffic is actually converting on a site. Converting to a sale is generally the way it goes. So the customer experience is what drives the conversion rate. The first thing you need to do is figure out where on your site you might have these customer experience issues that are blocking the purchases. So before you put any strategies into place, you should do a funnel and flow report to analyze the bottlenecks in your customers' paths and really, ideally, affect that conversion rate. When you're going to do a funnel and flow analysis, you want to start with a top level approach. Now, what that means is you don't want to get into the details right away. You're going to go down a rabbit hole. You're not going to get focused on the things you want to focus on. You want to take a very macro look and then move into the micro detailed look. I'll show you what I mean. So this is a funnel analysis here. You can see our funnels here. We start with the start of the session, then to viewed item, add to cart, and purchase. Now, this is to identify where in our site we have the problem before we zero in on exactly what the problem is. Now, looking at this here, start of session to viewed item, it looks like we're losing a big portion there. But again, it's not too close to the conversion, so I'm not that concerned about it. View item and adding it to cart, again, a drop off there, but that's to be expected. But it looks like we're losing 20% of our customers between adding to cart and actually making that purchase. And that's a little concerning to me. I feel like we could be getting better numbers there. We're losing nearly half of our people just before that final step. So now that I know I want to improve that area of my customer journey, I do another funnel, a little more detailed, and you can see the specific pages they hit during that part of the journey. So they're adding to cart. Most of those are moving over to cart visit and personal details. And it looks like after they put their personal details in, 92% go on to payment and shipping, and 97.7% of those are making it all the way to the thank you page. So looking at this chart, it looks like the weirdest gap that we have there is between cart visit and adding the personal details, because we're losing about 20% of our potential customers there. So what that tells me is that maybe I'll look a little closer into my personal details form, find what needs to be fixed and what I can change to make it simpler for the customer. Again, this process is just a way of finding where on your site you should improve to give the biggest impact, the most effect. All right, number two, when you're trying to find major customer experience issues, you got to step outside your comfort zone and talk to your customers. This is going to be about introducing post-purchase Net Promoter Score and online surveys. And again, this is to impact your conversion rate. So let's get into Net Promoter Score. Now, the Net Promoter Score is essentially a survey you give to your customers after they make their purchase, and it's based on how likely they would be to recommend your product to a friend. It's on a scale of 0 to 10. 9 and 10, people who rate it that way, those are your promoters. You love them. You should even send those guys to an external review site as an automatic trigger. Just because they love your product, you might as well let them go promote you. 0 to 6, those are your detractors. Those are people that are actively taking away from your brand's reputation. They're not happy. If they're 0 to 4, they're a really hard detractor. You should send them straight to your customer service team to see what their issue is. Now, what you do with NPS is you take all of your detractors and you subtract them, the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters, and you find your Net Promoter Score. As long as you're above 0, you're doing okay. If you're hitting around a score of 30, you're doing pretty well, and above that, you're doing great. The scoring is from -100 to 100, so it's harder than it sounds, but it's a very good way to tell how your customers feel about you.
So yeah, so just based off further things we can do to improve our conversion, right? We can use the data that we have. So there's one specific thing that a lot of marketers don't utilize nowadays, and what's open to a lot of people is data, customer data. So everything that somebody is doing on your site, as well as possibly offline, can be married into one single customer profile, and then based off that single customer profile, you can make some clever decisions to improve your conversion rate. So let's use simple examples such as somebody is coming to your website and they've looked at X, Y, and Z page, and you just take a lookalike of that person as well as other people that have also done similar actions as those, and those people from beforehand that have converted based off of certain recommendations or certain products that they bought. Why not take that information and push it to that person that you're looking to get to convert? So using product recommendations, for example, as a way to increase that conversion rate based off data that you have in your database. So nowadays, marketers are sitting on a gold mine full of data and aren't really sure how to use it. So by using AI algorithms, so for example, what we have here at Exponia, you can find things within your customer data that will give you some intelligence, which you're then able to push to customers on your website or prospects on your website to help them convert. So let's take one example that will help impact conversion rate, and it's around Facebook. So if we look at the old traditional way of doing things in Facebook, is you take your top buyers as an example, push your top buyers, let's call them gold buyers. You create the segment in your marketing automation platform, extract that segment, plug it into Salesforce, ask for a lookalike audience in Salesforce. Salesforce will then drive people to your website, which will then ultimately end up in similar people coming to your website, but you may not be affecting your conversion rate too well. You'll definitely get more traffic, but is it affecting your conversion rate? Are people actually buying? So if we look at this slightly differently, what we can do is, based on the customer knowledge that we have and the data that we have, we can extract certain, or we can probably exclude people that we know won't perform. So let's look at our customer database and understand, okay, let's look at people that are maybe returning goods, that are coming to the website but not actually purchasing that often. Are they actually gold buyers really? Like, what are the negative things that these people are doing that could possibly lead us to excluding them from somebody that we want to push towards getting a lookalike audience? So we actually get our lookalike, or the segment that we're pushing across into Facebook, much more granular, and we're much more informed about them because we're using many more data points. And therefore, when we actually get that lookalike audience in sales or in Facebook, we're actually driving people to our website that are more likely to convert, rather than people that we think might be more likely to convert. And that's the difference between how we did things in the past and how, with tools like Exponity, we're able to do it for the future. So another thing that we can do to impact this left-hand side of the formula is around cost per visit. And it's about using our customer data again to understand when the best time to talk to our customers is. So in the past, and I'm gonna use this as an example as well. Again, if we talk about past and future, in the past, people would say to you, okay, which day of the week is the best day to send an email? And people would say, oh, that's obvious, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nowadays, that's just not how it can be done. It's not the right way of looking at it all. Batch and blast is very much a thing of the past. It's about making sure that you're sending the right message out at the right time to the right person, which is based off of a couple of things, based off open rates, but also based off of conversion rates as well. And to be honest, if somebody came to me and said, hey, our open rates are, we want to improve our open rates, I'd almost argue, well, do you not want to improve your conversion rates? So we're actually driving, although we may not be driving as much traffic to the site, we're bringing more traffic in that's more likely to convert, and therefore lowering our cost per visit. And this is something that Nicola and myself were discussing before the call. Is something, Nicola, do you want to give us a quick insight into what you guys are doing over at Missguided in order to talk to your customers at the right time?
Yeah, certainly. That's right. We've got a couple of campaigns that can sometimes suffer from lack of cut through, for which we've taken sort of steps to improve that using personalization, but also ideal send time or optimal send time. So one of those is our win-back program, which is pretty much rooted in a traditional CRM approach of triggering based on last order date. But what we've been able to do there is personalize that send time and frequency based on engagement data. So we trigger an email out to customers when they've gone past a certain point in terms of their last order date. But then if they open and click on that, or don't open and click on that email, then we will send a follow-up reminder as a result of that data. And secondly, we also run a bounce back email as well, which goes out almost immediately after you've placed an order in an attempt to get you to place a repeat order. And we use ideal send time on that because given that it is sent so soon after placing an order, it can sometimes get lost in amongst all of the order notifications and delivery notifications. So we've really found that using ideal send time on that campaign in particular has really helped us.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's get into the other side of the formula, customer lifetime value. Now, first I'm going to break down customer lifetime value into the different KPIs that define it. And then after that, I'm going to give you just some overall overarching concepts to think about before we get into the specific strategies. So customer lifetime value. That breaks down into average order value, purchase frequency, and gross margin. Now I'll go over those very briefly. Average order value, that refers to how much your orders are worth. That makes sense. You just take your total sales revenue divided by your number of orders. Easy, simple, done. Now, purchase frequency, this is the one that a lot of people seem really interested in based off of our polls. So because of that, I'm going to give some bonus strategies in this slide. Now, purchase frequency, that's how many times your customers make a purchase in the time period you're measuring. You find that by taking your total number of orders and dividing by your total number of unique customers. Bonus strategy time, personalized with offers and recommendations based on your user's browsing history. Highlight current sales with an on-site badge. Minimize distractions leading to the point of sale. Those are 3 quick tips. We're going to go over some more specific strategies right after. Gross margin, that's how much margin you're making on your sales. Remember, revenue isn't what matters, margin is what matters. And you find your gross margin by taking your total sales revenue, subtracting your cost of goods sold divided by total sales revenue. Now we have a quick poll here. So let's set that poll up. And that's a question of, have you been successful calculating the average lifetime value for your company?
That's right, and that's in progress at the moment. It's a simple yes/no answer. And as soon as I can see that most of you have answered it, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So I'm going to do that now. And sharing the results, you'll be able to see that 33% say they have been able to, and the 68% haven't.
That matches pretty well with what we've found. Yeah, it's one of the really tricky metrics to find, and it's one of the things that really is a roadblock in the way to forming a proper customer retention strategy. So let's get into that a little bit. Now, again, these are some overarching ideas when you're finding your lifetime value. So you have to stop thinking in terms of first purchase. First purchase does not equal customer lifetime value, because as you can see on this chart here, a lot of your first purchasers are not going to move on to the second purchase. A lot of those won't move on to their third, and so on. So if you tie lifetime value to first purchase, then you're going to end up overestimating, or rather underestimating, your lifetime value, and that'll affect how much you can spend on acquiring your customers. Because remember, you have to know your customer lifetime value before you start setting your customer acquisition cost, or you won't know how much to spend. You'll be in that 10 to 15 euro range like we were talking about before. The next concept to get your head around is to get to know your customers using a single customer view. Now, I'll show you on the next slide a single customer view in Exponia, but basically it's a great way to organize your data into different segments so that you can find these highly detailed segments to send messaging to. So you can see some of our examples here: moms that have kids, single brand lovers, holiday shoppers, shopaholics. You want to humanize your data sets by really getting into them and creating these specific segments so you can market to them better. Here's that single customer view example. This is what it looks like inside Exponia. Now, a single customer view, just a quick explanation of one, it's a collection of different data profiles with all of the customer information updated in real time. That means that these segments that the customers are put in are also updated in real time. So you can see Jane here, items viewed, the purchases she's made, how much she's spent with your brand, last order, last campaign, all of her details. And even there in the bottom left, you can see key predictions based off of her activity. So with a single customer view, this is all updated in real time, and it's a great way to create those segments in a way that lets you really get to know your customers. So now, Nicola, why don't you take us on the next one about email personalization and what you've done with Missguided.
Thank you. Yeah, so in order to sort of move ourselves forward in the area of personalization, we've really been focused on 3 core strands. The first one being accepting and owning up to the fact that one size really doesn't fit all. A couple of years ago, and certainly before working with Exponia, the approach we took for email was that one size fits all weekly email routine that we rarely deviated from. And at the time, that supported the needs of the business. And it was really down to the availability of our resource, the depth of insight that we had, and our capabilities in terms of being able to execute on that data, certainly within email. And any kind of personalization that we wanted to do, whether it was about targeting customers who'd purchased a certain category or purchased a certain item, really involved quite a lot of heavy data and system lifting. But being an online retailer, as the guys mentioned earlier, we had this wealth of data, and that we were just not tapping into it, particularly in the email channel. And with the progression in targeting and personalization in other digital channels, we wanted better. So we really started to focus our efforts on strengthening that behavior tracking across all of our sites and being able to automate the use of that data when we had it. We also started to think about designing campaigns around those behaviors rather than simply using email as a megaphone for what the brand wanted to say. And I mean, there is still a place for those call outs. Just this week, we've done some work with Playboy, and we want everybody to know that. But equally, we need to blend that with more relevant content based on that user's individual session. And then secondly, we have really started to break down frequency. I share all of your pain in terms of trying to understand that and get to the data that tells us what our frequency is. But we've tried to break it down into regularity, frequency, engagement, and orders, rather than beating ourselves up about the fact that we weren't getting that second order. Since working with Exponia, we've been able to reduce our dependency on hoping for the best campaigns and sending everything to everyone who looked like they should receive it. And we've actually been able to repurpose some of our marketing to target those customers who've not shopped but have indicated intent by visiting the site, adding to bag, browsing certain categories. And when we combine that with our engagement data, we can really start to get under the skin of what regularity looks like. So if we stop looking at last order date and start looking at how often people are visiting sites and how often people are placing orders, we can then start to make some very different decisions about who we target and who we suppress. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, looking at personalization in all levels. So forgetting about the idea of putting somebody's name really poorly executed at the top of an email and starting to think about what it is about what makes the receipt of that email personal to that customer, whether that's about using data about their browse session or whether it's, as I mentioned earlier, using ideal send time. Next slide, please. So I've just got a couple of approaches here that I wanted to kind of go through with you to give you some examples of what we've done. So it's mainly in the area of retargeting where we've implemented a lot of these approaches with success. So to begin with, we've got our abandoned browse and abandoned bag programs. These are triggered based on site tracking, and I won't say that they're revolutionary. A lot of you will probably have campaigns that are similar to this. But what made it different for us at Missguided was that we were for the first time able to dynamically populate within Exponia using the content relevant to that user's session. We were able to use send times and control those within Exponia so that it was relevant to when that session had been abandoned or when the item had been left in the cart. And we also are able to run these campaigns through push notification. So where a customer has maybe browsed on our app and then abandoned that session, we target them through a push message rather than email, so that together within Exponia that data combines and gives us a better idea of where that customer is engaging and in which channel we might be able to reach her better. The re-engagement program targets contacts who stopped engaging with email but are visiting the site. So we use the data that we collect about that session. We're able to improve the relevancy of the content and arrest the potential for a lost contact. Where engagement is tracked from that campaign, the follow-up can then build on that relevancy. So I send an email to somebody who's not engaging with email, but they do click on the email, and then actually I'm able to then follow that up with a little bit more content based on the category or the piece of that email that they clicked on. On the flip side, where I'm seeing that customers are really enjoying our emails and are opening and clicking them, but they're just not purchasing, we can then decide to invest our retention budget there with maybe a personalised offer and introducing other channels such as WhatsApp, so that we get the dual effect of driving an order, but also exposing them to new channels.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. So just moving on from there real quick, just to the next stage in the customer lifetime equation. We look at frequency, okay? So there are certain things that influence our customers' purchasing patterns, and they can be anything from times of the year to sporting events, for example, or let's say seasonal things. So let's take one example of Black Friday. As a company, we know that Black Friday, if we're selling online, Black Friday is the biggest time of the year for us, most likely. And in the lead up to that, we know that we're going to have probably quiet patches throughout the year with the customers that we have. So it's about knowing and understanding your customers and if they're most likely to purchase in the likes of Black Friday. How do we take that information and understand what's actually making them purchase around Black Friday, and maybe splitting that across throughout the rest of the year to get them back and purchase again? Now, if they're highly price dependent, then why not look at something like a discount incentive, or actually optimizing it to a discount that actually suits that specific customer? Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if you're looking at personalizing your incentives, you're able to say, okay, one person, for example, Sam sitting next to me here, may convert at a 25% discount, whereas I might actually convert at a 10% discount. So you're actually killing two birds with the one stone there. You're helping get me back to purchase again, because you know that I'm price dependent, but you also then understand that, like, even if you give me a discount, I'm going to convert at a lower rate than the likes of Sam. So you're actually saving some money there for yourself as well. Just around this buying behavior, Nicola, what do you guys do at Missguided to understand your customer a bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, you know, we have previously run a lot of our campaigns simply off last order date. But what we've really been working with Exponia on is trying to understand that regularity of purchase. So, you know, a lot of our effort was being put into trying to turn the tide on customers who probably had lapsed and we were never going to see again. But we had no idea whether it was too early and actually their regularity meant that they'd be shopping in 2 months' time or 3 months' time, or whether it was actually really much too late to reactivate them. A last order date will tell you exactly that. It's just how many weeks has passed since they last placed their order. But what we've been trying to do is try and look at that regularity, see how many times and at what frequency across the year customers shop, whether it is about 2 orders, but those 2 orders are both placed at Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and then we don't see them again for a year, or whether actually we see customers placing an order seasonally. And then what we've been able to do with that is combine that with the engagement data that we're getting through email channels and push notification channels, so that we can understand who we need to target and how best to target them. So where to put our retention budget, because we were expecting to see this customer and we haven't seen them yet, and which channel to contact them in, so that when we do send an incentive, an offer, a message to try and get them back to site, it will be seen.
Okay, yeah, understood. It's about taking that information that you have about your customer and then actually creating a personalized message to bring them back to purchase at a time where they may not have done so in the past.
Absolutely.
Clever. Yeah. Okay. So if we still focus on our frequency here, there's one thing that we call the silent problem, and normally when people talk about a silent problem, it's normally very drastic. We see this as a drastic problem. Sam touched on it already today. Just around the drop-off between our first to second purchase. So everyone's focused on that, getting that customer in to get the first purchase, but we're obviously not focused enough on the second purchase. So you can see here in this particular slide, if we look at the funnel, we can see that, you know, people are coming from a first purchase, and we're losing over 53% of our customers aren't coming back to purchase again. So although you're doing quite well on that first purchase, you know, if you zoom in to that one specific area and try to get people back to purchase again, that's where the money is. And we can see then after we improve our first or second purchase, we can then jump in and, okay, how do we improve our second to third purchase, and so on and so forth. There are ways and means to do it in each different stage in the customer lifetime. It's about having specific campaigns set up to do that. It's about recognizing that by using this type of analysis, which is available via Exponia, but then also to trigger those campaigns based off these numbers. And it's about then to improve these first or second purchases. Again, it's nothing too drastic. It's about making sure that the message is going to them at the right time and it's the right message. And that's where things are left as important. If we move on to the next stage in the equation or the formula, we look at average order value. So one thing which is works in the favor of men quite a bit, actually, because men, and I speak for myself and possibly Sam as well, sitting here beside me, we're lazy shoppers.
I agree with that statement.
So we tend to shop for a look rather than shop for individual items. So for example, if you're looking to get your average order value, well, why not look to bundle specific items? So you might want to have, if somebody purchases a high value item, such as a pair of shoes, you may want to put something like a t-shirt and a bag in. Have one of those items at a discounted rate. On top of that, you may even be able to take those offers and actually recommend it based off the customer data that you have. So you're making this more, you're first of all increasing your order value. At the same time, by personalizing it, you're actually increasing your conversion rate. So by having somebody to come to the website via one of your marketing channels, come in, want to purchase a pair of shoes, give them a second and third option to bundle together based off a recommendation that you know from people that have bought similar things before based off the customer data that you have. And at the same time, also implement a discount in here as well to help them even further convert. So it's mixing those goods together to get that average order value up. And the third piece on the right-hand side of the formula is in gross margin. And this is one of the areas that I said before, is that people maybe are confused in terms of how do I actually impact my gross margin based on what I'm selling online. This sometimes comes up. Here's an example of ASOS. This is just an example we pulled a little while back. ASOS here, our guess is that the products that they're pushing here from a recommendation perspective are low margin goods. High margin. These are products that are own brand ASOS goods. Therefore, they produce them themselves. Therefore, the margin is high in them, and they'll be most likely to push these to guys that have probably purchased a low margin good beforehand. So you could even take that option and put it into the last example that I gave you, in that if you wanted to bundle products together, if somebody comes in and wants to purchase a low margin good, you could bundle it together with a high margin good like what you have here yourself. Recommend that to your prospect or your customer, and then they will come back and purchase, and you will increase your gross margin.
Great. Just to get back in here with one more of my favorite frequency impacting strategies, it's about launching a customer lifecycle management framework as a backbone for your campaigns. Now that's a big ask, but this is something you can start creating, and it really provides great support. You can still have other campaigns running in the background, but if you have a basic management campaign going at all times, then you'll be able to improve your frequency by always being on the ball and hitting people with the right message. So essentially, customer lifecycle management is about breaking your customers down into these main 5 stages you can see here: acquire, retain, increase value, cherish, and reactivate. And these are all the basic stages that your customers might go through, reactivate being as they're churning and you're trying to get them back. So just to quickly talk through the purposes: acquire, you want to become customers. Retain, you want to ensure that they had a great experience with their first purchase. Increase value, increase their frequency or average order value, or both. Cherish, you want to keep those positive experiences going because these guys are starting to love you. And then reactivate, those are the lapsing customers within various different stages. Now, at Exponia, this is an example of our customer lifecycle management framework. We've broken it down further using an RFM analysis to create 14 different segments. Now, RFM usually has 11 segments. We've also added engaged visitors, loyal visitors, and first-time customers. So these are our new segments that we've added so that you can get the idea from the visitor stage of acquire all the way through to the cherish stage of your best customers. Now, the beauty of lifecycle management is that you have specific campaigns going to each of these different segments. So an engaged visitor, that's somebody who's on your site, they're looking at stuff, but what do you want from them? Their email. That's the segment, you don't even have their email yet. So the campaigns are focused on getting that email so you can send more communications their way. Whereas first-time customers, you want to make sure they had a great experience and that they make their second purchase. So you have specific campaigns going to that one. Now, if you're using a single customer view like we discussed earlier, that's something where it can update these segments as customers make these decisions, meaning that they'll move from one segment to the other without you having to do anything. You just create this backbone of campaigns and let it run, moving your customers through it and allowing you to focus on doing special campaigns and promotions that aren't just these average ones you have going at all times. So that brings us to about the close of our presentation on this, but I'd love to ask Nicola, as we're getting to the end here, can you talk to us a little bit about the future for Missguided and some of the things you're going to be looking into in the days to come?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, you know, there's no two ways about it. We're unlike every other retailer in that we've got large volumes of customers and contacts where we can continue to fine tune what we do to improve the results that we get. So in many ways, we will just continue to do that and try and learn from what we're doing and learn from the data that we've got, and we won't be taking our focus away from it. But I believe that we've now got to a stage where the opportunity and the capability is now there for us to make a more conscious move across the marketing team to planning by customer, not planning by channel or by individual contact, and stopping this tug of war over what effectively is the same conversion opportunity. I mean, it's easy for us to say that, but not quite so easy to do. So some of the things that we will be focusing on are cross-channel orchestration. So making sure that the data that we've got is consistently and uniquely available to all of the channels that we market through, and to allow all of those channels to have the right data to be able to determine what that next best action is. We'll also be looking at optimum channel data. So I've mentioned it a couple of times this afternoon, that understanding where you're engaging your customer and where they're engaging with your brand is so key in being able to understand where you best place your budget, and giving us the best chance of resonating and delivering a message that actually gets through to her. We also talk about continuous customer conversations, so making sure that we're not sending out conflicting marketing messages. It should really be about that recipient, and the content that you send her should be relevant to her rather than simply something that the brand wants to say. And then finally, connecting all those journeys up. So making sure that across all of the devices and all of the sites that she uses and visits us through, we have one message for her, and it's consistent. It's the same regardless of which channel she's coming through, regardless of which device she's on, regardless of what territory she's on. Just so that that message is very consistent and cuts through and resonates with her.
Thank you, Nicola. All right, so now we've come to our question portion. So please type in any questions you have and we'll answer them as best we can.
That's right. So thank you both, for all of you, for a very informative session. Quick reminder on how to ask a question if you have one. On the control panel, there's a chat box. Write your question there, and we will aim to get to as many questions as we can today. If your question's for one person in particular, then do please mark that. So the first question we have today, you've covered a lot of things in this presentation. Where's the best place to start on these strategies with My Company?
You know, that's actually something that I'm glad we had a chance to address. Really what you want to do is try to find all of those 5 different metrics that make up the online retail formula, and then start wherever you have the weakest metric. It's really all about finding the lowest hanging fruit to improve. It's a lot better to move something from poor to good than it is to move something from good to great.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also, Sam had mentioned it a couple of times earlier, it's about breaking things into funnels in a way so that you can see it as a macro approach. And then if you make a macro funnel, so for each of the different layers within the formula, you should be able to see pretty quickly where you have some weak points. And then being able to drill into those weak points from there. So start off quite broad. Try not to break your head too much. I think most people will have a good feeling for where there's problems anyway. Take a look, a bit of a deeper dive into that gut feeling by creating a funnel, and then see where the drop off is, and then really focus on that one point and take one step at a time. You know, when it comes to these things, people try to do too much all at once. Sam just sort of got to there. If you try to do it all at once, you're not going to do too well. So try to tackle it one step at a time would be my advice, and start off with the low-hanging fruit.
That's great. And this question is for Nicola. I'm head of CRM for a medium-sized online fashion retailer. We've been struggling to reduce our customer acquisition cost. Has Missguided worked on that challenge? And do you have any tips based on what you did?
Hi. Yeah, so we have been focused in that area. This isn't, I will say that this isn't particularly my area of expertise, so I'll answer as best I can, but just so that you know you're clear, I'm not a head of performance marketing. So what we have done is really kind of focusing on 3 areas. So the first one being making sure that our measurement was up to scratch, that we weren't just looking at measurement of acquisition costs in a one-dimensional fashion, but that we were taking all of the data that we could from a variety of sources to give us sort of more of a rounded view on that. What that then enabled that team to do was change their media mix and change it quite significantly based on the data that they had, and then build out some optimization strategies that were very focused on delivering new. And in turn, what that's meant is that there is a greater clarity within the marketing team of who's trying to drive newness to the site and who's trying to deliver that retention and that frequency and that loyalty, which has actually sort of really helped the teams, but also the performance from those teams as well.
That's great. Now then, let's turn to some of the questions. I can see that we've got questions coming in, but for some reason I can't see them in my question pane. Sam, can you see them in yours?
You know, let me pull up.
Okay, well, why don't you go back to your...
Okay.
Go back to your presentation mode. That's great. For some reason, we seem to be having an issue with the questions. Would you mind, audience, typing your questions into the chat pane and sending them to...
We've managed to get them.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah. Can you please distinguish the frequency of food retailing and fashion retailing, where recency and shelf life plays a vital role? So, so it depends. So yeah. So if we're talking about frequency again, I think we can still take the same. We can still take the same building blocks or foundations as what we mentioned in this presentation already. Just around, you know, around what people have purchased before. So let's take an example. If you're selling food products online, you're likely having a customer base of people that have purchased with you before. Let's take that as an example. So let's use an example such as Tesco's or Marks and Spencer's or somebody that come to our website and purchase from us frequently, get these goods delivered to them. You've got that previous purchase history from them. Then you've also got if they're part of a loyalty scheme and you have a store, a brick and mortar store, those people are possibly buying in store from you as well and using a loyalty card. Therefore, with that single customer profile, you're able to gather both offline and online data. So you're able to push it against that one person, say, okay, these are all the things that they've purchased using whatever voucher codes, for example, online and offline. So you're able to predict, okay, what are they most likely to purchase? When are they most likely to need it? That could be a second thing that you could look at in food, for example. If there's a specific measurable on when that's going to go off and when they need to purchase another one, you may be able to ping them an email, for example. Hey, your XYZ is coming up to finish. You need to purchase it again. And then at the same time, you may know, okay, this guy is probably going to purchase based on a discount. Then you'll be able to determine what that discount is based on their previous buying behavior. Does that make sense?
All right.
Okay.
A recording may be available. I can next question here.
Okay.
Thank you
So
for that.
I'm now able to see the questions. Shall I take them back on?
You got them? Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go back into this.
So is the single customer view affected by GDPR rules in the EU GB marketplace?
So yes, it is. So we as a company are GDPR certified. We did this. We were audited back last year. We were the first company actually in Europe to be GDPR certified. So auditors actually gave us that classification. GDPR is really important to us. It's obvious to simplify it, we're not going to be gathering data on somebody that has not consented to the gathering of that data. If people have consented to the cookies being gathered on them and they want that information to be shared into a database, into a customer data platform, then yes, it's in there. If people have not consented, then it's not. That's the simplified answer. But to get into further into the details around it, we'd have to organise further call, which we'd be happy to do outside of this session.
That's great. So what is the optimal time duration for which the CLV should be calculated?
You mean like over a period of time?
Yeah, I think so.
Sure.
I think there's some variables as well that need to come into play. So you need to look at what you're selling and the value of what you're selling. So if it's high-end luxury fashion and you're looking at high value purchases, you need to be basing it off a longer customer sales cycle. So you need to be looking at what your sales cycle is and what type of pricing points you have. So if you're selling, as I said, something high-end and quite expensive, you're not going to get as high of a frequency as you would with something that's low cost. So if you're lower cost, you should be looking at a shorter time frame. If you're higher cost, you should be looking at a longer time frame.
That's great. The next question is for Nicola. Nicola, on Missguided, how are you keeping a consistent journey if somebody isn't logged in?
Yeah, that is a challenge. So what we have been able to do, so when I mentioned earlier, I won't go into lots and lots of technical specifics, but what I mentioned earlier about our focus on improving behavior tracking on our site. So that was one area that we needed to improve, because roll back sort of 2.5 years, we could do retargeting and we could send a retargeting email, but only if the customer was logged in. And as you know, very few customers conform with that journey of coming to site and behaving and logging in and then carrying on with their shopping. Added to that, the fact that we'd added in guest checkout, things like that. So all of those things were against us. So what we now do is we stitch on any ID that we can pick up. So very often when customers come to site, first of all, we don't have an email address for them. Sometimes we do, but usually we don't. We, from a data analytics perspective, we do match on email address, because it's usually the one thing that's consistent when they've placed an order. But earlier than that, we will pick up on things like device, IP address, anything that we can do within the realms of our cookie policy.
That's great.
Just to add to that as well, the technology that we have allows us then to stitch that data as well, so that we do start to build our understanding of who that user is, and ultimately once they do share an email address with us or some sort of personal data, we're able to stitch that together.
That tends to be the normal case across most customers. It's normally that unique piece of information. I call our email addresses almost like our passports of the internet.
Yeah.
That's our unique ID for any internet user is their email address. So yeah.
That's great. So the next question, also for Nicola, how do you measure the success of your email campaigns and allocate budgets? Is that a question for you?
Yeah. So we use all the same metrics that I'm sure all of you on the webinar today are also using. So we obviously look at the total volume of contacts, and certainly after GDPR, that we've had our challenges in that area. We measure open rate, click-through rate, deliverability, all of those things, click-through rate, conversion rate. But what I was sort of trying to illustrate in the slides today was that whilst those are a good indicator of engagement, whether people are reading what you're sending them, whether they're interested, whether it's making them click through to site, as we've introduced additional channels, particularly in the area of social, but also other digital channels, paid social, things like that, email has suffered. And so whilst we need to continue to look at those email metrics because they're a good indicator of whether people are enjoying what we're sending, we should also be looking at things like visits to site, the level of intent in those behaviours when they're on site, how many categories I'll be looking at, what type of quality session would you rate that as? Are they adding many items to site? Is it all high value items? Those things. And once you can sort of combine that data with your email data, it gives you a better idea of whether that email is succeeding in delivering quality traffic to your site.
That's great, thank you. Next question, also for you, Nicola. Do Missguided continue tracking customer behaviour in store?
Email behaviour in store?
Sorry, customer behaviour in
customer
store.
Behaviour. So different to sort of other retail, we do only have a couple of stores in our portfolio. So we do, but it's been a fairly manual process. So within our physical stores, we offer electronic receipts, and as a result of accepting an electronic receipt, you can also subscribe to marketing emails as well. So we do actively drive that, and we use that data within Exponia to feed those customers the same campaigns as our online customers. And so that data that we have about their engagement in what we send, but also their purchase behaviour in store, it can be combined with our online data. But it's a little, at this stage, it's a bit more, we sort of manually lift it in rather than it's kind of streamlined in a system.
That's great, thanks for that. Then a question, I think, for all of you. How much can you estimate marketing automation performance on CAC and CLV? Andy and Sam, is that something you can talk about?
Can you repeat that question again? Sorry,
how much do you estimate marketing automation performance on CAC and CLV?
Okay, yeah, so I understand. So I think it comes back down to being able to personalize based on the data that you have. So you look, if you've got a very, very small customer base, it's quite simple. If you've got 10 customers, you're able to, as a marketer, control the personalized message to those 10 customers pretty easily. You'd be able to do it personally yourself. You'd be able to have a couple of people on the marketing team create a message which is suitable to each of those 10 customers. Once you have hundreds of customers, it gets more difficult. Once you have thousands of customers, it gets very, very difficult. Once you have hundreds of thousands of customers, or up to millions of customers in your database, each with hundreds, maybe even thousands of data points against each of their different names, then that's when you start to run into difficulty. So let's talk about it in a couple of different layers. So if we're talking about the actual database piece around a customer data platform, storing all that data, and then attributing different touch points and every single little action that somebody does, attributing that to a single customer view, as we said before, or a single customer profile. Then, you know, as I said, if you're even talking in hundreds to thousands, it starts to make sense from there on in. Then if you add on top of it, you start to add on top some algorithms which are running within that data to try to find trends, to try to find lookalike audiences, to try to find things that others have done in the database, which you know you could push towards other people based off those lookalikes that I just mentioned. Give recommendations on your site based off the data that you have in that database, and that's when it starts to make more sense as well, because you can build those marketing execution layers on top, as we have with Exponia. So it's a customer data platform with some AI algorithms running within the data to find some interesting or information which can be executed upon, which is helping towards all of the things we just mentioned in this webinar, through those marketing channels which are built on top of that customer data platform. So the marketing automation piece, it ticks off a lot of boxes there. So you're talking about first of all, the customer data platform, a place to store all that data and a place to interpret all that data from an online and offline perspective against individual profiles. Then on top of that, you've got your AI algorithms running, which will find actionable items within that data. And then based on those actionable items, you've got your marketing execution channels, which are then fed by that data. And within those marketing execution channels, you've got the you've got the message, which is based off that person in that individual profile within hundreds of thousands or within millions of customers that you have. So without a marketing automation platform, and if you have hundreds of thousands, millions of customers, it makes perfect sense, and it actually plays a massive role.
That's great. I'm aware we've gone slightly over time. We've got 2 more questions, so I'm hoping we can just get to those very quickly. Question for Nicola. Have you or your team started using predictive modeling to feed into marketing programs? I hear a lot about it, but I can't quite get my head around how it's best used. Are you any further forward on this?
So we haven't put it into place yet, but that's certainly where our heads are going to. So when I mentioned earlier about regularity and using that kind of frequency and engagement and order data within Exponia, that's certainly what we are in good discussions with the Exponia team about, because for me that's a piece of Exponia that I think could really be beneficial for us, because it really takes us from a place of, you know, waiting until the customer stops doing the thing that you want them to do and then trying to get them to come back and do it again, to actually being able to use that Exponia platform and the data that you've got in there to say, this group of customers look like you don't need to contact them this week, but this group of customers look like you really do. So certainly that's where our thoughts are going at the moment.
That's great, thank you. And then a final question for Sam and Andy. If you make all comms agnostic of device or channel, 100% personal, is there a risk it depersonalizes the communications experience for the recipient, which is to say personal mixed with brand communications being clearly personalized? So
say that first part one more time.
If you make all communications, regardless of the device or the channel, 100% personal, is there a risk that you end up depersonalizing the whole experience? Well, or that may be a question to follow up on offline.
No, I think I think we can have a little bit of a discussion on it. Sure. So it depends on what you're defining personalization as. You know, as a customer, me personally, I like to get things which are, you know, which are going to most likely get me to convert. So if we're talking about, you know, if we're talking about discounted vouchers, which are more likely to get me to convert ahead of Sam, it may not be too clear to me that this particular message is actually personalized to me. So I may not know that that Sam's getting a 20% discount and I'm getting a 15% discount, as an example.
Yeah,
right?
when we say personalization, it's not necessarily, hey, Sam, I hear you like blah, blah, blah. It's more just recommendations for that specific person, or like Andy just said, discounts for that person.
Mhm.
So I think you can do it in a way that doesn't alert them in a way of feeling over personalized too, if that makes sense.
I mean, you need to be careful not to go down the creepy route, obviously.
Yeah.
So we have so much data that I think maybe that question, maybe we going down that route, maybe, hey, you get so personal that it's almost like, hey, you're getting a little bit too personal here. Yes, there's a happy medium there that you can have. But it's about personalizing with a message that suits the person based on getting them to convert. So I wouldn't say that you need to tell them that you know what they've had for breakfast this morning. I'd say that's probably going a little bit too far down the personalization route. But saying, hey, we can see that your order of breakfast cereal has probably run out because you ordered 2 weeks ago, and hey, why don't you take a 5% discount and come back and buy it again? That might be a little more comfortable of approach than going all out.
That's great. Well, thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us today. As I said, that's the last question that we have in. So thanks to our speakers, Sam Kellett, Head of Content at Exponea, Nicola Fox, Head of CRM at Misguided, and Andy Culligan, VP of Marketing at Exponea. Thanks to you too, our listeners, for tuning in and for all your questions. As always, we'll follow up by email with a link to the on-demand webinar that you can listen again to at your convenience. So thank you all once again for taking part, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.